Before we dive into this incredible story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. You're about to hear something that will change everything you think you know about family and truth. Enjoy the story. My name is Harold Hank Pemberton, and I'm 60 years old. For most of my life, I believed that love and sacrifice were enough to build an unbreakable bond with your children. I was about to learn how wrong I was. The call came on a Tuesday evening in September. I was in my small workshop behind the house, tinkering with an old radio, a hobby that kept my hands busy since retirement from the factory. My daughter Rebecca's voice sounded different, strained like she was walking on eggshells. "Dad, I need to talk to you about something important." She paused, and I could hear expensive laughter in the background, crystal glasses clinking, the kind of refined chatter you hear at country clubs. "About the engagement dinner this Saturday." My heart swelled with pride. My little girl, now 28, a successful marketing executive with her own apartment in the city, engaged to a young man from one of the wealthiest families in our state. The Ashfords owned half the commercial real estate downtown and had their name on hospital wings and university buildings. "Of course, sweetheart. What time should I be there? Should I wear my good suit?" I was already planning what stories I'd tell about her childhood, how proud I was of everything she'd accomplished. The silence stretched too long. I could hear her breathing, almost like she was gathering courage for something terrible. "Actually, Dad, I think it would be better if you didn't come." The words hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. My wrench slipped from my hands and clattered to the concrete floor. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" "It's just, the Ashfords are very particular about appearances, and you know how you are with your work clothes and your stories about the factory and your hands always being dirty." Her voice trailed off like she couldn't believe the words coming out of her own mouth. I looked down at my hands, calloused, stained with decades of honest work, hands that had built her treehouse, packed her school lunches, applauded at every graduation. "Rebecca, these hands put you through college." I heard a male voice in the background, young and entitled. "Tell him there's limited seating, make something up." Then laughter, cruel, dismissive laughter that made my blood boil. "Rebecca, are you ashamed of me?" Her voice became defensive, almost angry, like I was the one being unreasonable. "No, Dad, it's not that. It's just complicated. Maybe we can have our own celebration later, just us. I'll cook your favorite pot roast." She was trying to placate me, like I was a child having a tantrum. After she hung up, I sat in my workshop for hours, staring at the radio I'd been fixing. The silence felt deafening. That's when I started thinking about the name Ashford, rolling it around in my mind like a bad taste. Something about it nagged at me, pulled at memories I'd buried deep. I walked to my old filing cabinet and pulled out a folder I hadn't touched in 30 years. Inside were patents, contracts, and photographs from a life I'd tried to forget. My blood ran cold as the memories surfaced like a nightmare coming into focus. The Ashfords weren't just rich. They had stolen everything they owned, and I was the man they had stolen it from. Let me take you back 31 years to when I was 29 and the world was full of possibilities. I had just married my beautiful wife Martha, and we were living in a tiny apartment above Murphy's Deli on 5th Street. I was working at Harrison Electronics during the day, but every night I'd come home and work on my invention in our cramped kitchen. You see, I'd always been good with my hands, good with electronics. While other kids were playing baseball, I was taking apart radios and putting them back together. By the time I was in high school, I could fix anything with wires and circuits. But my real dream was to create something new, something that would change everything. I had developed a revolutionary component for satellite communication systems, a signal amplifier that was smaller, more efficient, and cost a fraction of what existing technology required. I knew it was special. I knew it would make someone very wealthy. I just never imagined it wouldn't be me. That's when I met Charles Theodore Ashford III at a local inventors meetup. He was about my age, charming, well-dressed, and spoke with the confidence of someone born into money. He said he was looking for promising new technologies to invest in, that his family had connections with defense contractors and telecommunications companies. "Hank," he said, putting his arm around my shoulder like we were old friends, "this invention of yours could revolutionize the entire industry, but you need someone with the right connections, the right capital to make it happen." I was naive, hungry for success, and desperately wanted to give Martha the life she deserved. Charles seemed like an answer to our prayers. He had fancy business cards, talked about meetings with Pentagon officials, and promised me 50% of everything if I'd just let him handle the business side. Martha was pregnant with Rebecca by then, and we needed the money. Charles kept assuring me that the patents would be filed in both our names, that we'd be partners. "Trust me, Hank," he'd say with that $1,000,000 smile. "We're going to be rich beyond our wildest dreams." But dreams have a way of turning into nightmares. The day Martha went into labor, I was at the hospital holding my daughter for the first time, tears streaming down my face as I promised her I'd give her everything. While I was becoming a father, Charles was at the patent office, filing my invention under his name alone. I didn't find out until 3 weeks later when I called him about our progress. His secretary said Mr. Ashford was unavailable and would I like to leave a message. When I pressed her, she finally said, "I'm sorry, sir, but Mr. Ashford's attorney advised us not to have any further contact with you." That evening, Charles called me from his lawyer's office. "Hank, I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding about our arrangement. My attorneys have reviewed everything, and it appears you were working as a consultant, not a partner. The severance check is in the mail." The check was for $500. My invention, the one that would make the Ashfords one of the wealthiest families in the state, was worth $500 to them. I tried to fight it, but Charles had expensive lawyers, and I had Martha's medical bills and a new baby. The legal fees alone would have bankrupted us, so I buried my anger, took a job at the factory, and spent the next 30 years watching the Ashfords build their empire on my stolen dreams. And now my daughter wanted to marry into that family. After that devastating phone call from Rebecca, I couldn't sleep. I kept pacing around my small house, looking at family photos, trying to understand how we'd gotten to this point. There was Rebecca at 5, gap-toothed and proud, wearing the little hard hat I'd gotten her for Take Your Daughter to Work Day. There she was at high school graduation, hugging me tight, whispering, "Thank you for everything, Daddy." When had I become someone she was ashamed of? The next morning, I decided to do some investigating. I drove to the public library and spent hours on their computers researching the Ashford family. What I found made my stomach turn. Charles's son, Marcus Theodore Ashford IV, was Rebecca's fiancé. The boy was 32, had never worked a real day in his life, and had a reputation for treating service workers like dirt. But what really caught my attention were the business articles about Ashford Industries' founding technology, my technology. They called Charles a visionary inventor and credited him with revolutionary advances in satellite communications that formed the cornerstone of the family's telecommunications empire. My hands were shaking as I printed out article after article. Every photo of Charles receiving awards, every mention of his brilliant innovation, was like a knife twisting in my chest. He had built monuments to my stolen work, and now his son was going to marry my daughter. That afternoon, I drove past the Ashford estate, a massive colonial mansion with perfectly manicured grounds and a circular driveway that could fit 20 cars. I saw Rebecca's Honda Civic parked next to a red Ferrari that probably cost more than I'd made in 5 years. My phone rang as I sat there staring at that house built on my dreams. "Dad?" Rebecca's voice was softer now, almost guilty. "I was thinking, maybe you could meet Marcus before the engagement dinner. Something casual, just coffee." For a moment my heart lifted. Maybe she was having second thoughts about excluding me. I'd love that, sweetheart. Great, but Dad, please, could you maybe not mention the factory or your inventions? Marcus's family, they're very traditional. They might not understand. The hope died in my chest. What should I say I do for a living then? Maybe just say you're retired. And Dad, Could you maybe get a haircut and wear something nice? After she hung up, I sat in my car outside that mansion and felt something I hadn't felt in 30 years, pure, burning rage. Not just at Charles Ashford for stealing from me, but at my own daughter for being embarrassed by the man who had sacrificed everything for her. That night, I went down to my basement and pulled out a trunk I hadn't opened since Martha died. Inside were all the original documents from my invention, the prototype schematics in my own handwriting, the lab notebooks with dates that predated Charles's patent application, even photographs of me demonstrating the device at the inventors' meetup where we first met. I had kept everything, even though it hurt to look at it. Martha had insisted I hold on to it all. Someday, she'd said, the truth might matter. Well, someday had arrived. As I spread the documents across my kitchen table, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to let the Ashfords steal my daughter the way they'd stolen my invention. But first, I needed to meet Marcus Ashford face to face. The coffee shop Rebecca chose was in the upscale part of downtown, the kind of place where a cup of coffee costs more than I used to spend on lunch for a week. I arrived early, wearing my best khakis and the button-down shirt Rebecca had given me for Christmas, my hair freshly cut at Murphy's barbershop, where I'd been going for 20 years. Marcus Ashford IV walked in 15 minutes late, not bothering to apologize. He was tall, blonde, with the kind of easy confidence that comes from never having to worry about money. His watch probably cost more than my car. He looked around the coffee shop like he was slumming it, then spotted me in the corner booth. "You must be Rebecca's father," he said, extending a perfectly manicured hand. "Marcus Ashford." The moment I heard that last name spoken aloud, something cold settled in my stomach. "Harold Pemberton, my friends call me Hank." He didn't say I could call him anything informal. We ordered our drinks. His was some complicated espresso creation that took the barista 5 minutes to make. Mine was black coffee. As we waited, he checked his phone constantly, barely acknowledging my presence. "So," he said finally, "Rebecca tells me you're retired." "That's right. 30 years at Morrison Manufacturing, then some time at the electronics factory before they closed down." His eyebrows raised slightly. "Electronics? How quaint." My father always said the manufacturing sector was dying in this country. No innovation, no vision. I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. "What does your father do?" Marcus puffed up with pride. "He's Charles Ashford III, founder and CEO of Ashford Industries. Maybe you've heard of us? We revolutionized satellite communications technology back in the 80s. Dad's quite the inventor." Every word was like a slap in the face. "Inventor, you say?" "Oh yes, he holds dozens of patents. The core technology that built our company was entirely his creation. Brilliant man, really. Self-made, you know." I gripped my coffee cup so tight I was surprised it didn't shatter. Self-made? Absolutely. Started from nothing, just a brilliant idea and the determination to see it through. That's the Ashford way. We don't wait for handouts or blame others for our circumstances. We make our own success. The implication was clear. Unlike some people, he was saying. Unlike me. For 20 minutes, I listened to Marcus drone on about the family business, their charity galas, their vacation homes, their yacht. Every word was poison, but I smiled and nodded like the proud future father-in-law I was supposed to be. Then Rebecca arrived and I watched my daughter transform. She became smaller somehow, more deferential, hanging on Marcus's every word like gospel. When she laughed at his jokes that weren't funny, I saw a stranger wearing my daughter's face. "Dad's been telling me about the family business," I said when there was a lull in conversation. "Sounds like your father is quite the innovator." Marcus smirked. "Oh, he is. You know, it's funny, back in the early days, he had to deal with a lot of, what's the word, wannabes. People who claimed they'd invented things Dad had clearly created. Sad, really. Some people just can't accept that success comes from talent and hard work, not from making wild accusations." Rebecca laughed. "That must have been frustrating for him." "Oh, it was, but Dad always said the best response to jealousy is success. Let your achievements speak for themselves." I excused myself to the bathroom before I did something I'd regret. Standing at the mirror, I looked at my reflection, a 60-year-old man in discount store clothes, watching his daughter choose money over loyalty, prestige over truth. When I returned to the table, Marcus was showing Rebecca pictures on his phone. This is the patent office ceremony where Dad received his Innovation Award, and this is him with the Secretary of Defense discussing defense contracts. I saw my own invention's schematic diagram on the phone screen, now labeled as Charles Ashford's Breakthrough Innovation. That's when I knew there was no going back. That night, I called Rebecca. I had to try one more time to reach the daughter I'd raised, the girl who used to look at me like I hung the moon. "Dad, I'm so glad you and Marcus got along," she said, and I could hear the relief in her voice. "He said you were very nice." Nice. Like I was a harmless old man who'd performed adequately. "Rebecca, we need to talk. Really talk. There are things about the Ashford family you don't know." Her voice immediately became guarded. "Dad, please don't start with conspiracy theories or anything crazy. Marcus warned me you might..." He warned you about me? He just said sometimes older people get jealous of successful families and make up stories. Please don't embarrass me. Embarrass her. Everything I did embarrassed her now. Sweetheart, what if I told you I knew Charles Ashford 30 years ago? What if I had proof that... Dad, stop. Her voice was sharp now. "I know you've had a hard life, and I know you sometimes feel bitter about how things turned out. But the Ashfords are good people. They've been nothing but kind to me. Kind to you because you're useful to them. But Rebecca, they're not who you think. I have to go. Marcus is taking me to dinner at the country club. We're meeting his parents." The line went dead. I sat in my living room, staring at the photos on my mantelpiece. Rebecca's high school graduation, where she'd given the valedictorian speech about how her father had taught her that hard work and integrity were the only things that mattered. Rebecca's college graduation, where she'd thanked me for showing her that success meant nothing if you compromised your values to get it. When had those lessons stopped mattering to her? The next few days passed in a blur of rejection. I tried calling Rebecca several times, but she either didn't answer or cut the conversation short. When I suggested meeting for our usual Sunday breakfast, she said she was busy. When I offered to help with wedding planning, she said Marcus's mother had hired a professional coordinator. I was being systematically erased from my daughter's life. On Friday morning, exactly 1 week before the engagement dinner I wasn't invited to, I made a decision. I put on my best suit, the one I'd worn to Martha's funeral, and drove to Ashford Industries headquarters. The building was sleek glass and steel, taking up an entire city block. In the lobby, mounted behind the reception desk, was a massive display showing the Ashford Innovation Timeline. The centerpiece was my satellite amplifier component, now called the Ashford Breakthrough Device, with a photo of Charles shaking hands with a general. "Can I help you?" the receptionist asked, looking at me like I might be lost. "I'd like to see Charles Ashford. Tell him Harold Pemberton is here about an old invention." She made a phone call, spoke in hushed tones, then hung up with a puzzled expression. "Mr. Ashford will see you. 32nd floor, executive suite." The elevator ride felt like ascending to Judgment Day. When the doors opened, Charles Ashford III was waiting for me. He was still handsome at 61, silver-haired now, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my monthly pension. But I could see the fear in his eyes. "Hello, Charles." "Hank." He forced a smile. "This is unexpected. Come into my office." His office was the size of my entire house, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. On his desk was a photo of Marcus and Rebecca looking like the perfect wealthy couple. "Beautiful girl," Charles said, following my gaze. "My son is very lucky." Yes, he is. We stared at each other for a long moment. 30 years of silence hung between us like a loaded gun. Finally, Charles spoke. "What do you want, Hank?" "What do I want?" I repeated, settling into the leather chair across from his massive desk. "That's an interesting question, Charles. What I wanted 30 years ago was partnership. What I wanted was honesty. What I wanted was credit for my own invention. Charles's face remained perfectly composed, but I caught the slight twitch in his left eye, the same tell he'd had during poker games 30 years ago when he was bluffing. "Hank, we've been through this. The legal matters were settled decades ago. You were compensated for your consulting work. $500. I let the words hang in the air. You paid me $500 for the invention that built this empire. He gestured around his opulent office. This empire was built through decades of hard work, strategic partnerships, and sound business decisions. Yes, your component was part of our early success, but my component was your early success. Without my satellite amplifier, there would be no Ashford Industries." Charles stood up and walked to his window, hands clasped behind his back. "Even if that were true, and I'm not saying it is, that was a long time ago. We're different men now. I'm a grandfather. You're about to become an in-law. Can't we let the past stay in the past? The past has a way of catching up with you, Charles, especially when your son is about to marry my daughter." He turned around slowly. "Rebecca is a lovely girl. Marcus adores her. They're going to have a wonderful life together." "Are they? Because from what I've seen, your son treats her like an accessory, and your family treats me like an embarrassment to be hidden away." "Now, Hank, that's not... I wasn't invited to the engagement dinner." Charles had the grace to look uncomfortable. "Well, these things are complicated. Limited space, you understand. Limited space." I laughed bitterly. "Your dining room could fit my entire house." "No, Charles, the space isn't limited. The truth is limited. You can't have the man you robbed sitting at your table, can you? It might raise uncomfortable questions." He returned to his desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out a checkbook. "What would it take for you to relocate? Maybe find a nice retirement community in Florida. I'd be happy to help with expenses." I stared at him in disbelief. "You're trying to buy me off. Again. I'm trying to ensure everyone's happiness. Rebecca deserves a smooth transition into the family. Your presence complicates things. My presence complicates your lies." Charles set down his pen and looked at me directly for the first time since I'd arrived. "Hank, let me be very clear. If you try to disrupt this wedding, if you make wild accusations or attempt to damage my family's reputation, my lawyers will destroy you. I have resources you can't imagine, and I will use every single one of them to protect my son's happiness." "And what about my daughter's happiness?" "Rebecca is happy. She's marrying into one of the most respected families in the state. She'll want for nothing, except a father who's allowed to love her openly." Charles sat back down, his expression softening slightly. "Hank, I'm not a monster. I know this is difficult, but sometimes we have to make sacrifices for the people we love. Rebecca has chosen her path. Don't make her choose between her future and her past." That hit me like a physical blow, because I knew he was right about one thing. Rebecca had made her choice. She'd chosen their money over my love, their status over our history. But as I stood to leave, I turned back to Charles one more time. "You know what the funny thing is? All these years I kept quiet because I thought it would protect Rebecca. I didn't want her growing up knowing her father was a failure, a man who'd been cheated and was too weak to fight back. And now I realize I was protecting the wrong person." I walked out of that office with my head held high, but my heart was breaking, because I knew what I had to do next, and it was going to hurt Rebecca more than anything the Ashfords had done to me. The engagement dinner was tomorrow night, and I was going to attend, whether I was invited or not. Saturday evening arrived grey and drizzling, matching my mood perfectly. I stood in front of my bedroom mirror, adjusting the tie I'd worn to my wedding 40 years ago. The suit was old but well-maintained. Martha had always insisted we take care of our nice things because we couldn't afford to replace them. I looked at the manila envelope on my dresser, thick with 30 years of evidence. Patent applications, laboratory notebooks, photographs, witness statements from the inventors' meetup, everything that proved my satellite amplifier was my creation, not Charles Ashford's. My hands shook as I picked up the envelope. Once I walked into that dinner party, there would be no going back. Rebecca would never forgive me for humiliating her in front of the most important people in her new life. but maybe that was better than watching my daughter disappear into a world built on lies. The Ashford estate was blazing with light when I arrived. Valets were parking Bentleys and Mercedes in the circular driveway, while guests in designer evening wear chatted on the marble steps. I felt like a sparrow among peacocks, but I walked up to the front door anyway. "Good evening," I said to the uniformed doorman. "Harold Pemberton." He checked his list, frowned, then spoke into his earpiece. After a moment, he stepped aside. "Right this way, sir." The interior of the house was even more magnificent than I'd imagined. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow light across marble floors, and oil paintings worth more than my annual income lined the walls. About 50 guests mingled in the main parlor, champagne flutes glittering in their hands. I spotted Rebecca immediately. She was wearing a navy blue dress that probably cost more than my monthly pension, her dark hair swept up in an elegant chignon. She looked beautiful and sophisticated, and completely out of my league. She also looked mortified when she saw me. "Dad?" She appeared at my elbow within seconds, her voice a harsh whisper. "What are you doing here?" "I came to celebrate my daughter's engagement, but I told you. You told me not to come. But sometimes a father has to do what's right instead of what's convenient." Before she could respond, Marcus appeared beside her, looking like a recruitment poster for old money privilege in his perfectly tailored tuxedo. "Mr. Pemberton," he said with a smile that never reached his eyes. "What a surprise. I hope you don't mind me crashing the party. I brought a little gift." I patted the manila envelope under my arm. Rebecca's eyes widened with alarm. "Dad, please don't make a scene." "I'm not here to make a scene, sweetheart. I'm here to tell the truth." That's when Charles Ashford approached our little group. He looked older than he had in his office, the strain showing around his eyes. "Hank," he said smoothly, "so glad you could make it after all. Champagne?" The irony wasn't lost on me. The man who'd stolen my life's work, offering me a drink in celebration of stealing my daughter too. "Thank you, Charles. Beautiful home. Must have cost a fortune to build." "We've been very blessed," he replied, but I caught the warning in his tone. "Yes, you have, especially considering how your fortune began." The temperature around our little circle seemed to drop 10 degrees. Rebecca grabbed my arm. "Dad, can I speak with you privately?" But before I could answer, Marcus raised his champagne flute. "Everyone, if I could have your attention, please." The room fell silent as 50 pairs of eyes turned toward us. Marcus put his arm around Rebecca's waist, pulling her close. "I want to thank everyone for being here tonight to celebrate my engagement to this wonderful woman. Rebecca, you've brought so much joy into my life, and I can't wait to make you an Ashford." Polite applause rippled through the room. I noticed Rebecca's smile looked forced. "I also want to thank my parents for raising me with the values that attracted such an amazing woman. Dad, you've always taught me that success comes from innovation, hard work, and never giving up on your dreams." More applause. Charles beamed with pride. That's when I stepped forward. "Speaking of innovation and hard work," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the silent room, "I'd like to propose a toast to the real inventor behind the Ashford fortune." Rebecca's face went white. Charles's jaw tightened. Marcus looked confused. I opened my manila envelope and pulled out a photograph from 1994. This is a picture of me demonstrating my satellite communication amplifier at the Riverside Inventors Meetup. "Charles, you remember that night, don't you?" The silence in that opulent room was deafening. 50 wealthy, influential people stared at me like I was a homeless man who'd wandered into their exclusive world, which, in a way, I was. Charles Ashford's face had gone completely pale, but he recovered quickly. "Hank, this really isn't the time or place for what? For the truth." I held up the photograph so everyone could see it clearly. "This picture was taken 31 years ago. That's me, demonstrating the revolutionary satellite amplifier that I invented in my kitchen. Charles here was just an investor who promised to help me bring it to market." Marcus laughed nervously. "I'm sorry, but this is ridiculous. My father invented that technology. Everyone knows that. Do they? I pulled out more documents. These are my original lab notebooks, dated 6 months before your father filed his patent application. These are witness statements from other inventors who saw me demonstrate the device. This is the prototype I built with my own hands. Rebecca grabbed my arm so hard her nails dug into my skin. Dad, stop this, please. But I couldn't stop. 30 years of silence had built up like water behind a dam, and now the dam was bursting. Your father and I were partners, Marcus. 50-50, he promised. He said he had the business connections I needed, the capital to manufacture my invention. All I had to do was trust him. This is insane, Marcus said, but his voice had lost some of its confidence. He looked at his father for support. Charles stepped forward, his composed mask beginning to crack. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm afraid Mr. Pemberton has been nursing a grudge for decades. The legal matters regarding his consulting work were settled long ago. Consulting work? I laughed bitterly. Is that what you call it when someone invents the technology that makes you millions and you pay them $500? A murmur ran through the crowd. These were business people. They understood the implications of what I was saying. Mrs. Ashford, elegant in her pearls and silk, moved to her husband's side. Charles, what is this man talking about? For the first time in 30 years, Charles Ashford looked truly afraid. Eleanor, it's ancient history. A misunderstanding. I pulled out the patent documents. Here's your husband's patent application, filed March 15th, 1994. Here are my laboratory notebooks, dated September through December of 1993. 6 months of development work, all in my handwriting. An older gentleman in the crowd, I recognized him as Judge Morrison from the newspaper Society pages, stepped closer to examine the documents. These appear to be authentic, he said quietly. Rebecca was crying now, mascara streaking down her cheeks. Dad, why are you doing this to me? I'm not doing this to you, sweetheart. I'm doing this for you, so you know who you're really marrying into. Marcus's face had gone from confused to angry. Security should throw this lunatic out. Go ahead, I said. But first, let me show everyone the real timeline of the Ashford fortune. I spread the documents on a nearby table like a dealer laying out cards. 1993. I developed the satellite amplifier in my apartment kitchen. 1994. Charles promises to help me bring it to market. March 1994. My daughter Rebecca is born. While I'm at the hospital with my wife, Charles files the patent under his name alone. April 1994. Charles cuts me out of the deal entirely. The crowd pressed closer, studying the evidence. These weren't stupid people. They could see the truth laid out in black and white. 1995, I continued. Ashford Industries lands its first major defense contract based on my technology. 1996, they go public. By 2000, they're worth $50 million. Today, over $200 million. All built on the invention they stole from a 29-year-old factory worker. Judge Morrison looked up from the documents. Charles, is this true? Charles's composed facade finally cracked completely. It was a business arrangement that went wrong. These things happen in the tech industry. Mr. Pemberton was compensated. $500, I shouted. $500 for the invention that built your empire. Eleanor Ashford stared at her husband like she'd never seen him before. Charles, you told me you invented that technology yourself. I refined it. I developed it further. I turned Hank's basic concept into something marketable. You stole it, I said simply. And now your son wants to marry my daughter, the child I was holding when you betrayed me. The room erupted in whispers and shocked conversations. Several guests were already moving toward the door, clearly uncomfortable with the drama unfolding. But Rebecca surprised everyone by stepping forward, her face streaked with tears, but her voice steady. Is it true? She asked her fiancé. Did your family steal from my father? Marcus looked helplessly at his parents, then back at Rebecca. Baby, it doesn't matter. That was 30 years ago. We're different people now. It matters to me. The silence that followed Rebecca's words was profound. My daughter stood in the center of that opulent room, surrounded by wealth and privilege, but looking more alone than I'd ever seen her. The woman I'd raised was finally surfacing through the polished exterior she'd adopted to fit into this world. "It matters to me," she repeated louder this time. "Marcus, I need to know the truth. Did your family steal my father's invention?" Marcus looked desperately at his father, but Charles was staring at the documents spread across the table like they were radioactive. The tension in the room was suffocating. Finally, Marcus spoke, and his words revealed everything I needed to know about his character. "Look, Rebecca, even if there was some kind of business disagreement 30 years ago, so what? That's ancient history. My family has built something incredible. We've created jobs, contributed to society, supported charities. We're not going to apologize for being successful." The casual dismissal of 3 decades of injustice hit me like a slap. But what happened next shocked everyone in the room. Charles Ashford stepped forward, his face grave. "Marcus, stop talking." "Dad, I'm just saying that—" I said stop. Charles looked directly at me, and for a moment I saw something I hadn't expected. Genuine remorse. "Hank is right. I stole his invention. I betrayed his trust. I destroyed his dreams to build my fortune." The room erupted in gasps and whispers. Eleanor Ashford went white as a sheet. "Charles, what are you saying?" "I'm saying 30 years of guilt is enough," he turned to address the stunned crowd. "When I was 29, I was drowning in debt, desperate to prove myself to my father, who thought I was a failure. Hank's invention was my lifeline, and I grabbed it without thinking about the consequences." Marcus looked like he'd been punched. "Dad, you don't have to." "Yes, I do. Because standing here watching Rebecca choose between her father and our family, I finally understand what I really stole from Hank. It wasn't just his invention. It was his ability to be proud of what he'd built." I felt tears burning my eyes. This wasn't how I'd expected this to go. Charles continued, his voice steady despite the devastating admission. "Every award I've received, every article calling me an innovator, every time someone praised my brilliant invention, I knew I was living a lie. And the worst part is, I convinced myself I deserved it, that I'd somehow earned it by having the business sense to market it." "Charles, please," Eleanor whispered, "think about what you're saying. I've thought about it every day for 30 years. He looked at Rebecca, whose face was streaked with tears. "Your father deserves recognition for what he created. More than that, he deserves an apology." The room was dead silent now. Marcus looked like his world was crumbling, which it was. Rebecca stood frozen between her old life and her new one, unable to move in either direction. Then Charles did something that surprised everyone, including me. He walked over to the wall where a framed patent hung, my patent, with his name on it, and took it down. "This should have had Harold Pemberton's name on it from the beginning," he announced to the room. "This company, this fortune, this house, all of it was built on technology, created by the man standing before you." Judge Morrison cleared his throat. "Charles, these are serious admissions you're making." "I know exactly what I'm saying, Judge, and I know what needs to happen next." He turned back to me, extending his hand. "Hank, I can't give you back 30 years, but I can give you what's rightfully yours. Half of everything, the way it should have been from the beginning." I stared at his outstretched hand, this moment I'd dreamed of for 3 decades finally arriving. But all I could think about was Rebecca, standing there with her heart breaking, watching her perfect new world collapse around her. Marcus finally found his voice. "This is insane. Dad, you can't just—" "I can and I will." Charles's voice was firm. "Rebecca, I'm sorry for what we asked you to do. Hiding your father, being ashamed of where you came from, that was wrong. Hank raised an incredible woman, and we should have been honored to welcome him into our family." Rebecca looked between Marcus and me, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know what to do," she whispered. That's when I realized the most important thing wasn't the money or the recognition or even the apology. It was making sure my daughter knew who she really was. "Rebecca," I said softly, "you don't have to choose anything tonight. But remember what I taught you when you were little. Remember that your worth isn't measured by what you have, but by how you treat the people who love you." She nodded, unable to speak. As guests began quietly filing out, avoiding eye contact and whispering among themselves, I realized this was just the beginning. The real conversation, the one that would determine my daughter's future and mine, was yet to come. The engagement party ended in complete chaos. Within an hour, the Ashford mansion was empty except for family and the catering staff who whispered among themselves as they cleaned up the remnants of what should have been a celebration. I found myself sitting alone in Charles's study, still clutching the manila envelope that had changed everything. Through the doorway, I could hear heated voices from the living room. Marcus arguing with his parents, Rebecca crying, Eleanor Ashford demanding explanations that would never satisfy her. Charles appeared in the doorway, looking like he'd aged 10 years in the last 2 hours. Mind if I join you? I gestured to the chair across from me. It's your house, built with your money, he said quietly, settling into the leather chair. Hank, I need you to know something. What I said in there, about the guilt, about living with the lie, that was all true, but there's more. I waited for him to continue. 6 months ago, when Marcus told us he was engaged to Rebecca Pemberton, I knew immediately who she was, your daughter. I've been watching your family from a distance for 30 years, making sure you were okay. The admission hit me like a physical blow. Watching us, anonymous donations to Rebecca's college fund, the scholarship that covered her senior year, that was me. The hospital bills when Martha got sick, I had a foundation cover them. The property tax relief you got when you turned 62, I pulled strings. I stared at him in shock. You've been helping us? Trying to ease the guilt, I suppose. But when I realized Rebecca didn't know who her father really was, what he'd accomplished, what he'd sacrificed, I knew I had to make a choice. Before I could respond, Rebecca appeared in the doorway. Her makeup was gone, her elegant hair had come undone, and she looked exactly like the little girl who used to run to me when she was scared. Dad? Mr. Ashford? I need to talk to both of you. She sat down in the third chair, her hands shaking slightly. I've spent the last hour thinking about everything that happened tonight, and I have some things I need to say. Marcus appeared behind her, his face red with anger and humiliation. Rebecca, we need to talk privately. No, she said firmly. We need to talk here with witnesses because I want everyone to hear this clearly. She turned to face me first. Dad, I am so sorry. Not just for tonight, but for the last 6 months. Somewhere along the way, I forgot who raised me. I forgot the man who taught me that integrity matters more than appearances, that hard work matters more than inherited wealth. Sweetheart, let me finish. You sacrificed everything for me. You worked jobs that broke your body so I could have opportunities you never had. And instead of being proud of you, I became ashamed. That's not who you raised me to be. Then she turned to Marcus. And you. Tonight I learned that your family's fortune was built on stealing from my father. But what's worse is how you reacted when you found out. No apology, no remorse, just anger that your perfect life got complicated. Marcus's voice was cold. Rebecca, you're being emotional. Think about what you're throwing away. I'm not throwing anything away. I'm choosing who I want to be. She stood up and began removing her engagement ring, a massive diamond that probably cost more than my car. I can't marry into a family that would ask me to hide my father. I can't build a life with someone who thinks my father's pain doesn't matter because it happened 30 years ago. Rebecca, please, Marcus pleaded. We can work this out. My father just said he'd make things right with your dad. Making things right isn't the same as never doing wrong in the first place. And your reaction tonight showed me exactly who you really are. She handed him the ring. I'm sorry, Marcus, but I choose my father. Marcus looked at the ring in his palm like he couldn't understand how it had gotten there. You're making a huge mistake. My family could give you everything. Your family already took everything from mine once. I won't let it happen again. After Marcus stormed out, the three of us sat in silence for a long moment. Finally, Charles spoke. Rebecca, you're making the right choice. Not just about Marcus, but about choosing family over money. I wish I'd been that brave 30 years ago. Rebecca looked at him with curiosity. What do you mean? I mean your father isn't the only one who lost something important 30 years ago. I lost my integrity, my honor, my ability to look at myself in the mirror without shame. Money can't buy those things back. As we prepared to leave that mansion, Rebecca and I together finally, Charles handed me a business card. My lawyer's information. Call him Monday morning. We have 30 years of profits to discuss. But as we walked out into the cool night air, I realized something important. The money would be nice, the recognition would be satisfying, but what I'd really won tonight was something much more valuable. I'd won my daughter back. And that, I thought, as Rebecca slipped her arm through mine, was worth more than all the Ashford millions combined. The fight wasn't over. There would be lawyers, paperwork, probably years of legal battles ahead. But for tonight, walking away from that house of lies with my daughter beside me, I felt like the richest man in the world. The truth, after 30 years of silence, had finally set us both free, but something told me this was just the beginning of a much larger story.